Hey, this is Arsenette from Rambling Weekend. We're testing out a new podcast format because I kind of miss what I did with William. So this is going to be kind of all over the place, and until I kind of get everything organized. This is an episode 0, so introducing a new podcast partner on top of all of this. So let's start off at the top. Who's the guy on my right?
I would be Don, and last time I checked, I've been your husband for 20 plus years.
And who's on the other side?
Hey, this is William. How's it going?
For those who are new, William was my podcast partner for the Final Stage podcast for approximately 2 years. In fact, it was just before the full 2-year anniversary. This podcast is basically sort of a geeky / anime, animation, everything in between, gaming, whatever the heck we want. But geek culture type thing, but mostly concentrating on animation and stuff like that. Obviously, as things arise and time goes on and we change things, it might add to that, but that's basically the general premise. So in the meantime, let's see. Don, do you want to start off with how you started with this world in the first place?
Well, it would have been Saturday mornings in the mid-70s. Yes, I'm that old. Watching Marine Boy in black and white, because that's what it was actually drawn in back then. Don't remember much of it, except snippets of the theme, because I was probably about 5, maybe 6, when it first started. That progressed into Speed Racer, and then Gatchaman would have been the Japanese version. We knew it as Battle of the Planets here in the States. And from there into what we called Star Blazers, but what older fans would know as Space Battleship Yamato. And everything in between. I guess it just started when I was very young. I was always very drawn to animation and artsy type things. And Japanese animation at the time, the only thing that was even remotely on par with it in America was Disney, which is ironic considering that a lot of anime was inspired by Disney.
Yeah.
So just the quality level and the attention to detail, even in the very early titles, made a very big impact on me.
Actually, mine fits just about as yours, because it was... In fact, we watched the same channel, but from different states. We're still all part of the Philadelphia Greater area, or Greater Philadelphia area. So we had the same channels. He lived in Jersey and I lived in Philly. So my memory actually starts just about the same time frame, but I remember a little bit more. I have 2 older sisters, and whatever they watched, I watched, and for some strange reason, I retain all that. I also started with Marine Boy, Astro Boy, and all of those, the black and white things, and then so... Yeah, so it's really funny because as he's saying, it's like, yeah, I remember all that. I watched a lot of cartoons, and I can tell the difference between the regular cartoons, like the Hanna-Barbera and that sort of thing, to anime. It just looked different. And again, having the benefit of having 2 older sisters, I knew it was Japanese, so... Like, I remember people saying this, like, I didn't know that it was Japanese. And, like, I knew it was Japanese from the beginning, and I gravitated towards that because I always found that fascinating. And besides, the difference was most of the shows that I watched, people died, and that stuff just did not happen in the American versions. So I'm like, okay, right. Of course, we had the edited down versions where, like, the original Star Blazers was a lot tamer than what the original Space Battleship Yamato was. They edited out a lot of, like, the death scenes and the blood and the decapitations or whatever, and we had the slightly edited version, and you can tell that somebody actually did die, but we didn't get to see it. And then I saw the original, like, freaking 20 years later, and I'm like, oh, okay, no, that wasn't joking. So, William, your turn.
Okay, so I didn't start watching anime in the 70s because I wasn't alive yet. So similar to you, I've always been a big cartoon guy ever since the beginning. Watch stuff like Bugs Bunny and a lot of Hanna-Barbera stuff when I could. We actually didn't get Cartoon Network right away. It wasn't available through our cable provider until I was like middle school, I would say. But my first so actually I had relatives who had Cartoon Network, so it's like there was a point in time where like going to relatives was a big deal because it's like, oh, I can watch Wacky Races and stuff. And Penelope Pitstop, I was a big fan of Penelope Pitstop. But my first anime was this little obscure show called Pokemon. So it was recommended to me by a friend when I was in second grade. And basically he was subscribed to Nintendo Power at the time, and he got a preview VHS tape that they used to send out to subscribers, basically previewing this new thing called Pokemon. And like the anime came first in America, and he was like, and he told me, it's like, yo, check out this new show. It's like on at 6:30 in the morning, because when Pokemon first started airing, it was actually in syndication before it was on any network. So I actually ended up seeing Pokemon when the very first time it aired on American television. And from that point on, I'm like, wow, this is actually pretty intense, because they didn't show the first episode. They showed the episode where they were on the ship, and it ends with them on trapped underwater in a capsized boat. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, stuff doesn't happen in American
This is intense.
Cartoons.
Yeah, exactly. And so the crazy thing about that is the 20-year anniversary of Pokemon beginning airing in the US is like next month, in like 2 weeks or a week. And I just, oh god, I'm getting older. And yes, as far as anime stuff, that then evolved into other stuff that aired on Saturday mornings, like Digimon, Card Captors, which is obviously Card Captor Sakura, Yu-Gi-Oh! Eventually, and other shows of that similar nature. And then eventually, when we got Cartoon Network, I was watching stuff on Toonami. A lot of people were like, they like Gundam Wing. I never had the opportunity to watch Gundam Wing or Outlaw Star, or even Sailor Moon, because all that stuff left Cartoon Network by the time I was able to watch it. For me, Toonami, it's like Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball, G Gundam, Rurouni Kenshin, that sort of stuff. And then eventually, I had a different friend told me about the wonders of Adult Swim, which allowed me to expand into a bit more of the mature anime, where the first anime from Adult Swim that I discovered was a show called Inuyasha, and it just happened to watch the most violent episode of the entire series, and at that point I'm like, whoa, blood, I'm in.
It's funny with Inuyasha that was your first exposure to Rumiko Takahashi, because she also wrote Ranma 1/2, which Takahashi does not resolve storylines. When she gets to a point that something needs to happen between a couple of characters, in this case it would be Ranma and Akane, she just introduces a new love interest to throw a wrench into the works. So there's never anything ever resolved. Inuyasha was a little more self-contained than that, and was a little more cohesive.
Yeah. Actually, I have Ranma. I'm going to check that out at some point. But
it's a great series. It's definitely worth, and it's a classic in anime fandom, and it's definitely worth watching.
Yeah, I just like Rumiko Takahashi's character design style. It's just, there's just something about it that I just, every time I see it, I'm just like, that looks really good.
I've never seen Lum.
Yeah. I actually own, by pure chance, I own a couple of VHS tapes that I got from a comic book shop that are factory sealed, and they only cost me 60 cents a piece.
Wow.
So, yeah, I got lucky, because Urtsuri Yatsura is super expensive on the secondhand market right now.
Yes, it is. Yes, that has always been a popular series. So
yeah. So I'm begging any anime company out there in North America, hey, you want to make some money? License Urtsuri Yatsura. You'll guarantee you whatever you charge is going to be way less than what it costs in the secondhand market.
That does remind me too. The secondhand market, that was our introduction to Dragon Ball. A friend of mine, and this was back in the early to mid 90s, so 94, 95, right around there. My friend, and at that point in time kung fu teacher, was getting third or fourth generation fan subs of Dragon Ball, like 2 to 3 episodes per VHS tape.
Yeah, this was before it even hit here.
Anywhere from $10 to $30 a tape. And you had to, for the younger audience, this will be a little difficult to understand, but you had to sit with your finger on the tracking adjustment on your remote for your VHS in order to watch it, because the tracking lines just jumped all over it. And it was really hard to read the fan subtitles underneath.
And there were yellow subtitles with white background.
If you were lucky, they were yellow subtitles. Sometimes they were white subtitles with no drop shadows, and then things got really interesting.
There were some points where we couldn't even see what was going on, because it was, at that point, depending on which tape it was like 4th generation.
Yeah.
So the tracking lines were burned into the copy to begin with. So it was like this line across. But that was the stuff for us, because Dragon Ball for us is not... we didn't grow up with Dragon. We were already adults. In fact, at the time where we ended up watching the majority of it, we were already married.
I was, 26? I think?
Yeah, 25, 26.
When we started watching that.
And so we ended up getting the joke, because the whole thing is a joke. All of the character names, the tropes. Now that you have a background of, or I should say, your generation had a background of Naruto and Bleach and Shonen in general. If you go back and compare to Dragon Ball, where one fight lasted 30 episodes, only to find out that they were wearing weights the whole time, and now they're going to do it for real, because this is the crap that happens in Shonen all the time.
This is my true power.
Yeah, and then the filler episodes being actual filler, I actually found those to be more hilarious than any of them. I loved the filler episodes of Dragon Ball. So when Kai came out, and I'm like, you missed the point. But, I would have drag out fights with people on the internet going, it's like, no, it was like the best thing ever. And I'm like, you didn't get the joke.
Yeah, like, oh no, it's not a joke. And I'm like, well, then you need to talk to the author Toriyama, because he even said it was a send-up of shonen anime.
And then when Super came out and nobody dubbed it yet, and they heard the actual original voice of the greatest man, Saiyan ever to live, in Goku's now by, 70-year-old woman?
Well, yeah, I guess she is probably in her 60s
like
or 70s by this point. But he's squeaking away, this planet-destroying were-ape. Sounds like a 12-year-old girl, really, really excited most of the time.
God, we love the hell out of that series, because we're sitting there laughing. We'd have this like pause the tape, this is great. And then, of course, but an entire generation got the English version that came up in Cartoon Network, and slamming theme song, which was totally different.
I mean, Dragon Ball, just taking it at face value without knowing the history, is fun to watch. Yeah. Unless you watched it on Funimation during the initial release, where Steve Blum had one of the greatest lines as Tom from Adult Swim. He says, and you're all ready for Vegeta and Goku to finally throw down, and the next episode, Frieza lands on Earth again. Raditz lands on Earth again. We feel your pain, because that's all they had licensed at the time. So every time you got to the big battle with Goku and Frieza, and Goku would finally go Super Saiyan, and then you go the next day, and why is Raditz on Earth again?
Yeah. Dude, you want do you want to know the worst example ever of that when it comes to watching Toonami?
Okay.
Has to be Inuyasha.
No.
Okay.
Yu Hakusho.
Oh yes. Yes.
So the Dark Tournament arc is quite possibly, in my personal opinion, one of the greatest tournaments ever in shonen anime, at least from an entertainment point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine this for a second. The Dark Tournament arc is actually quite long. You're watching this tournament. You're invested in it. Mm-hmm. It's literally... The next episode is literally the start of the final round.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what?
Went right back to the beginning.
You gotta wait a year and a half.
Yep.
Yes.
That's what happened with Dragon
18
Ball.
months.
Actually, I think for my lifetime, the worst thing that I've suffered, quote unquote,
What, Tenchi?
would be Tenchi Muyo.
I said that story before.
And you know, I'm not going to throw up a spoiler tag for a 25-year-old anime series. You're just going to kind of have to get over it. But when Tenchi goes to fight Kagato and basically gets blown into a third of his total body mass by an attack, they find him. Well, actually, they don't even find him. Ryoko reappears on Ryoki and just throws his bloody headband to Ayeka, and they realize that he's been effectively killed. And that was it. 2-3 years later, I think we finally got more episodes of Tenchi.
Yep.
But I was like, what a place to cut off a show. Holy crap. I mean, at least tie something up.
I did a video on my channel just on there because it was somebody that had the Laserdisc, copied the Laserdisc onto a VHS tape, and then brought the VHS tape over to where we were. So we're watching it. I'm totally invested in this. This is great. Where's the other tape? Oh, that's all I had. What? We didn't find out. Oh, God, how long was it?
I'm going to kill
At
you
least
now.
a couple years. Because that's the kind of stuff, like you had mentioned, you had a friend that introduced you and another friend that introduced... That's the same thing with us, because we had a friend that used to work at, was it GameStop?
Well, it was EB Games, and then it was GameStop.
And then back then, they used to have anime. They used to sell anime in their stores.
Well, they also used to have, for employees, a type of loaner program where they expected their, I think it was their full-timers. They might have done it with part-timers as well. But they expected them and encouraged them to take home games and anime and watch and or play them so that they could then speak with some knowledge to people coming in and asking questions. So that's how we actually got into the Final Fantasy XI North American beta test, because GameStop employees got it and they were allowed to give out so many keys.
Yep.
But he used to bring everything over. I mean, videotapes first, because this is really going back a ways, and then eventually DVDs. So we got to see a lot of anime that we probably would have never laid hands on. I mean, there were no rental services really at that time. Blockbuster had no anime. West Coast Video, anime was kind of a joke at that point in time. Netflix didn't exist. In fact, you couldn't have had Netflix because the internet was basically dial-up and broadband was the new shiny thing.
Yeah. Internet pre... I would even say 2003, 2004.
It was a big deal when Mike got his T1 line at his house.
Yeah. That was
like
just
T1,
dumb.
oh my god. You're getting 5 megs down.
I remember using dial-up back at on our family computer. And looking back on it, I'm just like, how did we ever stream video on that thing? It took up maybe 5% of the screen when you're actually watching the video, because any higher resolution would be impossible.
Yep.
How did we?
Not just even that, just the limitations of downloading whatever it was.
Oh yeah,
the jump from 28.8 to 56K baud modems. Oh, what an amazing speed! How could you need anything faster than this? Well, it's before we understood how computers really function and how computer technology just increases in power exponentially every so many. I think it was every 2 years or 2.5 years. I forget the name of the law, but it's just amazing watching my friend load Windows 95 for the first time, version 1.0, and looking back and realizing, wow, that was the first time Windows was actually... I mean, you had a GUI in 3.1, but it was really rudimentary compared to 95, and we're looking back going, who could ever possibly need a 1 gigabyte hard drive?
I have videos these days that are more than a gigabyte in size.
In fact, the sound file of this is probably going to be a gig.
And if you work in RAW format, a gig is kind of just your opening lines.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just, yeah.
But anyway.
No, but it's funny because when you go... Cartoon Network was interesting because we got it when we were married. And we used to watch Code Lyoko and...
that was French, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's French. Was it we used to
which
start off.
explains the outrageous accent.
Yeah, it was funny because we ended up watching Dragon Ball Z there in English just to see the comparison. And of course, I think that arc went over twice before finally on the third time it went all the way through.
Yeah, I don't know how Chris Sabat kept his voice through that.
I have no idea. Well, there were 5 versions of Dragon Ball, depending on if it was the Ocean dub or the Funimation dub or the Well, you had actually done a study on G Kids and all of the properties that had gone through them and then gone through different ones. That was an interesting because this. Going back a little bit to Final Stage Podcast, after we recorded Final Stage Podcast, and I'm like rendering the sound file and uploading it to the net, so then he can William can pick it up, and then he does all the editing. We'd sit and talk for like 4 or 5 hours on anime. I wish I recorded some of that stuff because they were really cool stuff, and you did a whole thing just on like the different variations on some of your favorite series that you watched. And I'm like, how many hands did this property go through?
Man. Dragon Ball is an interesting one because, so a lot of people don't know this, but the Dragon Ball was originally licensed by Harmony Gold. So there's like a couple episodes of that dubbed. Everyone do yourself a favor, look up the Harmony Gold opening of the original Dragon Ball. It is hilarious. Also, they changed Goku's name to Zero, so actually everyone's name was changed. Then Funimation got it, but they only dubbed the original Dragon Ball for like 16 episodes. And I think that wasn't handled by them because that was before they did things in house. I forget. It wasn't Ocean. It was a different group besides Ocean. Then they stopped that and they jumped straight to Dragon Ball Z because I think they realized it was probably more marketable in the current American market. So they did that. That was originally dubbed by Ocean. And then eventually they did Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball themselves in-house, so that got redubbed. And then when they got Kai, they redubbed that. Not to mention with Dragon Ball Z, when they originally dubbed it, they had to dub it according to Turner's standard and practices. So so eventually, when the uncensored version got released, they had to, at the very least, redub those lines. So a lot of times Dragon Ball has been dubbed. Of course, you got GT and more recently Super, and
we don't talk about GT.
There's a lot of
stuff. We
don't
talk about Super either.
Super doesn't exist, and neither does GT.
Got a question. When was that Turner edict?
It's
late 90s, early 2000s?
It's probably before
I have to look for it.
It's probably before I got Cartoon Network, so I got Cartoon Network in the around 2000s, early 2000s, so it might have just been when Toonami first occurred, because I believe it's been around ever since Toonami started taking anime.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is obviously this probably predates a good portion of the people that are listening at all. Ted Turner, who at the time owned Turner Networks, which was in the South. I know it was definitely around Atlanta because that's where he was based.
Turner is in Atlanta, Georgia, yeah.
So all of basically was a cable network that took a good portion of the South.
Yeah.
He bought. Was it Warner Brothers?
No.
He bought Hanna-Barbera, right?
I'm trying to remember what it is.
I think he bought some properties from Warner Brothers and I don't think Hanna-Barbera was
library.
He bought the
Hanna-Barbera library.
Right.
I know that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Well, because when that happened, he basically tried to make it non-violent.
Yes, I'd like to take a moment and personally thank Ted Turner for ruining the memories of my childhood and the hard work of all of those animators.
Well, that's not the only thing. He ended up basically changing all of the cartoons that I grew up with, everything. He would edit out entire sections. He changed voices from black to white.
The sterilization of Tom and Jerry.
Yeah. And it it was far-reaching because it hit anything that hit. And, of course, anime was affected as well because knowing that it wasn't going to pass basically their version of the censors, they would change properties to fit under the new guideline, which is why I call it the Turner Edict.
Mm-hmm.
That lasted, 10 years?
Yeah, there was something, the editing is ugly enough in and of itself, but there was something that was particularly egregious from an art standpoint. William, I don't know if you've ever seen these, they might be really difficult to find at this point, but if you can find old episodes of Popeye that were still in black and white, these were the ones
I've never seen black and white Popeye.
You can thank Mr. Turner for that. These were the ones that were played before movies in movie houses. I mean, that's how cartoons got their start anyway, But in the old black and white Popeyes, I didn't really come to appreciate this until I was much, much older. The artists that were involved in that, through use of shadow and just different filming techniques, created a depth of field in the old Popeyes that if you get a chance to really see them untouched, it's almost like a three-dimensional effect. You feel like you could just about reach into the screen when you watch them. And when Turner colorized them, it's like going from film to VHS. Mm-hmm. There's no depth of field. It just flattened everything. And I remember looking back and seeing this and going, oh my God, you've ruined it.
Yeah, well, between that and they changed everything else. They changed dialogue.
Not even that, just the art alone. Just looking at it. I mean, Popeye, people say, well, what are you talking about? But this was almost like a masterclass in animation. Mm-hmm. If you saw what these people managed to achieve with just black and white and grayscale and creative use of film cells and causing that depth, or that depth of field, it was just really amazing. And as soon as he colorized them, it all disappeared. Yeah. And it was just, looking back now at 46 years old, it's like, what a tragic thing to do to a piece of art.
We were heavily, it's funny because, being in different states and whatever, like, we were heavily into animation as just like I used to do, I explained before, like flip books and stuff like that. Took art classes, and just that kind of appreciation for just that alone, which is why I gravitated towards anime in general, because anime took time, not all of them, but anime took time to actually make a lot of realism. Like you had mentioned, a lot of the Rumiko Takahashi's type style. It just, you had a lot of things. I mean, all of it was hand drawn. This is well before computers, and I'm not saying that computers ruined everything, because it's not. It's its own medium. But the hand drawn stuff, I mean, that stuff was nuts. The stuff that they managed to do freestyle, which is probably why I loved One Punch Man, because One Punch Man had basically the masters of their genre. I mean,
animation wise, yes,
there were like 5 or 6 different animators, and they're like, here, have fun with it. And
I believe it was different directors, or different animation directors, at least, for each episode. I think that's how it worked out, and you can see it if you watch the animation.
It was amazing to watch, like, straight up hand drawn, fluid motions with like everything, the exaggeration of certain things, almost like the old Hanna-Barbera stuff, where you have like the eye moving, the body still in the back, and then the face separating, and it's just that kind of exaggeration.
If I remember correctly, that was one of Walt Disney's tenets.
Yeah,
that when you do a reaction, you have to make it big. Don't do. Not that there's not subtlety in anime. I mean, that's one of the things that differentiates anime from a lot of other animation throughout the world at the time, particularly in the States, because that's what we were exposed to.
Yeah.
But subtleties get missed often, especially when there's a lot of action. But when you've got the classic eyes popping out of the head, nobody misses that as a expression of surprise. Whereas eyebrows just going up, it might be a little too subtle for a show with a lot of action.
I did like how those gestures were different in the East. because
Yeah, they have a very
things
different
like,
take.
Yeah, so
Like the blank eyeballs with the
with no pupils.
the little no pupils, just blank white or black with swirly pencil lines around
Or
the edges to show
the,
that they've kind of checked out a little bit.
the drop of sweat with the
Yeah, the sweat drops. Yeah.
or they blush a lot, which in general is not very much used here in the West as much.
Well,
Just
you'd need to be embarrassed of something in order to blush.
This is true. So, William, we've been talking a lot.
What? It's almost like you're a couple or something.
It's amazing. Who knew?
Yeah. So
It's funny, but we've talked a lot like that.
yeah. So since you mentioned One Punch Man, I'm going to use this opportunity to segue into a thing by using One Punch Man. Hey, look what I bought!
Yay!
Very, very nice.
Oh, you got. Wait, did you get the silver one?
Yeah, got the nice one.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, good man.
Okay, so here's the segue. So I bought that while at Otakon recently.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
I like to talk about my time at Otakon.
Yeah.
Please do.
All right. So Otakon was good. This was the first time that they were in Washington, D.C. at the convention center there. It is a lot bigger. That's the first thing I noticed. There's a lot more room in general, and they did not fill the room that they could have used. So there's room to grow. There's definitely
Well, a lot of people waited out this one until all the kinks were out.
Well, they did a
But
good
it's
job.
nice that they'll be able to. What was the? Do you know what the crowd size was?
It was
Because I know they had been going down.
24,000. They just recently announced.
Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad because at one point there were like 38, 40 grand, and then last couple of years was into 31, 32. So brand new location, even going out to 24. That's not. I mean, it's considerable, but didn't the same thing happen with AnimeNext when they moved from? Because bigger location, but it was slightly less amount because,
I mean, it always happens when you move.
It's a completely different location, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when they move to Atlantic City, that makes it difficult for folks from New York, even though it is just down the parkway.
I think it'd be easier because you could
still
just train down there.
No, I still drove to AnimeNext. I took the train to DC because I'm not driving that.
Good call.
Yeah.
Not fun.
Oh my god!
How do you like that experience?
The train,
I mean, outside of the not driving.
the train
part.
went perfectly fine.
Perfect.
Perfectly fine. Yeah. So there was no problem. I actually sat next to an Amish family on the way down at one point.
Yeah. Mennonite.
Yeah. Yeah, Otakon was good. Obviously, I mean, there's a few kinks they could have worked out. But there was a feedback session that I was at the end of the day, the last day, and they know some of the kinks. They're gonna work on the kinks. One of the kinks that they had no control over is that during Saturday night there was like a tremendous thunderstorm that happened, and there was so much rain coming down that it overwhelmed the drainage system and water started leaking into Artist Alley.
Oh, that's the worst place to leak.
And so they had to temporarily shut down Artist Alley. Poor guys. This one woman, I felt so bad. Apparently a woman slipped and smashed her head on this concrete. Yeah.
Ow.
Yeah, but she gave an update, said that she's fine, so that's good. The reason I wasn't even aware it was raining, and this is a good segue. The reason is because I was at the world premiere of Eureka 7 High Evolution Part 1.
Now this is a reboot?
This
or remake?
Both, I think. Okay, so the first one is, I would say, is more remake, but there's... Okay, I'll give a little mini review. So
go ahead.
Okay, so I didn't know what to...
Especially for someone who's never seen the original.
Okay, so I didn't know what to expect going into this. I just knew Eureka 7, It has nothing to do with AO or that terrible first movie that was an alternate timeline. Oh my god, that movie was the worst. So Eureka 7 is, for those who remember, it's a mech anime from like 2007, actually earlier, 5, I want to say. At least that's when it's something like that. Sometime around there. Really good. I really like it. They announced this movie project where there's going to be one new movie every year. Apparently they finished the movie like 4 days before they aired it at Otakon. I had front row seats. That's the benefit of going to something by yourself. You can just pick up spare seats that are lying around. So the movie is very much in 2 parts. The first part takes place before any event. Takes place before any event that happened in the TV show. So so the first part is about the the creation of the Summer of Love, which for those who don't know, the Summer of Love was this big world-changing event that led to the death of Renton's father because he basically sacrificed himself to save the world. So they go into detail about what happened in that, and that section was awesome. It had good animation. And it had they included all the characters that the show had originally established were part of the military and thus would be there because this was a military thing. And there was the whole war with the Corallians that were going on. It was really well executed. That part was great. Then things got weird, but like in a way I've never seen before, because then it turns into essentially a TV recap movie, but like it's very I'm still debating if they just took the TV show and cut it up, or if they went for like a style. Okay, I'm sure they didn't actually do that, but for some reason the aspect ratio got shrunk down into a more of a 4:3 thing from that point on, and they essentially started retelling the plot of the story, but mostly focusing on like one of the middle plots, which like I don't want to give too much away, but it's the part where Renton runs away from the Gecko state, which is a very interesting choice that they decided to go with. And like, but the thing is, everything's shown like out of order. Like they constantly you'll see these words that either say play forward or play back, basically telling you if you're going back in time or forward in time, and they'll let you know how many days before, how many you're at. And a lot of it is very much just kind of recapping the events. What's weird is that there's like the whole like start of the series is very much not touched upon. In fact, very little of the movie actually involves Renton being on the actual Gecko state, which is like a large part of the original series. In fact, barely any members of the crew are even shown on screen. It's very.
Now you were warned ahead of time that this was going to happen in terms of that they were adding to it and expanding upon that universe.
No, well, I wasn't. They might have announced it.
Oh, interesting.
I was not aware.
Yeah, because I remember reading about it. And that where people were worried about, I'm like, so long as it's not AO, it should be okay. Okay. Because a lot of people really love the original television series. So I don't know. I don't want to say this was reflective of like everyone in the audience, but I can tell there were people around me who were starting to get frustrated with the play forward, play back sort of thing. Like a lot of people just like, come on, like let's move forward, please. How long was the movie?
It was. Oh, I should know this. It was like hour 40. No, it was hour and a half. Yeah, it was an hour and a half.
And for them to get
so
maybe we're just confused, or just like maybe multiple takes, you might be able to appreciate it better.
I think, yeah, okay. So I'm gonna get into that part. So there was actually one of the guys sitting next to me had never seen the TV series, and he was a little bit lost.
Okay.
But so after the movie, they had a conversation with the director. It was one of those like mediator and it was more like it was interview style. It wasn't like open to the con goers or anything like that. And one of the things he did say is that ultimately the movies are meant to be watched like together as a whole, so maybe it'll make more sense then. I will say that looking back on it, it does feel like the second half of the movie was kind of like, we have to get this part out of the way for what we want to do next, because at the very end of the movie, after the credits, they do a next time on Eureka 7 High Evolution in the same style that they used to do the next time segments on the actual TV show.
Interesting.
And what I'm not going to tell you what happened, but let's just say there's no way this is going to be a recap of the TV series from this point on.
Interesting.
Because what they showed is very much different.
Okay.
So
interesting.
I'm actually looking forward to the next two movies. So
well, that's good because that was what I'm sure that they were hoping, because when you're doing, and it's not like if they did like a Lord of the Rings style where they recorded all of it already. If they just finished that movie, they haven't touched the second one yet.
Yeah, they very much said like, they started pre-production on the second movie, but that's about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a bit. I would say the second half is a bit rough. For a few reasons, but I still liked it. I mean, the first half was actually pretty great, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the other two parts are. So, yeah, we'll see what happens.
Cool. The only conventions I've ever gone were the AnimeNext at the old location. Or the most recent of the old locations, because I think they've moved a few times since they started.
It's a good thing they moved, because that location is shutting down, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
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 I could just imagine a rainstorm there in the old place.
Oh,
that would have been a nightmare.
It'd be worse, because the original AnimeNext was between 4 different buildings that were like not connected to each other. You had to go outside to walk between them.
Well, not to mention with the amount of heat and humidity, it's surprising there wasn't a thunderstorm in the buildings for the most part.
Yeah.
Whew, that was rough.
Yeah. So DC, you like that location?
Yeah, I say overall, I liked it.
Now that they're there for a few years, at least?
I don't know the contractual situation, to be honest.
Okay. Because I heard at least in a couple of years.
I would think, considering the fairly recent difficulties in Baltimore over the last few years, that moving to DC was probably a good move I never thought I'd hear myself say moving to DC would be a good thing from a security standpoint, but it's probably a little bit safer for con goers, just again because of the sad troubles that have been going on in Baltimore.
Okay, funny story about that really quick. During the feedback session, a short argument actually broke out on whether or not Baltimore or DC was a safer location, or rather, which one was the more dangerous location. The DC locals were like, no, DC is more dangerous, and the Baltimore locals were like, no, Baltimore is more dangerous.
Yeah.
Why am I not surprised?
Of course.
Although seeing it from the opposite, it's a toss-up. The fact that we're sitting there going like, I don't know.
Well, as an outsider.
Can't judge.
Local to the region and having spent time in both cities due to work obligations. Up until about 3 years ago, I would have said Baltimore was safer, hands down. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know. It's sad that, not getting into too much social commentary. It's sad that we're in that situation at all.
I'm happy at least that they have room to grow, because it has always been their problem, and given a lot of the difficulties that Otakon had in the past with, line con and stuff like that, or just not being able to house the amount of people, because their lineup is ridiculously awesome. The stuff that they managed to secure for fans is a lot more than unless you're going to AX, but that's in the West Coast. East Coast really never had that kind of clout. So the idea of being able to get, world premieres and stuff like that, only Otakon was able to do stuff like that.
Well, the only thing close to that would have been New York Comic Con.
Yeah,
They
but
would've
that's a
had that.
Comic-Con as opposed
But
to
as
a
far as
straight-up
any
anime
type of
thing.
convention with the kind of clout to pull in big name talent, that's the only thing that would be even close.
Now, William, you've been to all of these.
Yes.
You've been to New York Comic Con,
Yes, I
so... Oh, God.
Yeah, I mean, they got a couple of years ago. They got the world premiere of Boruto, so they got stuff if they want it.
Yeah. It's a different audience, though. You get stuff... I mean, that's, Marvel headquarters and stuff like that, so it's
You definitely get a lot of crossover, but...
Yeah, but that's what I meant by straight-up anime, because, AX is...
Yeah.
almost the size of New York Comic Con, and it's all anime.
I would say the presence of anime stuff in New York Comic Con is definitely decreased over the years.
Yeah, which is a shame. But, well, it is what it is. They go where the money is, and, I think Marvel's been using that to premiere all of their own stuff, and a lot of NBC's there as well. So a lot of network stuff gets in there. Sony does their stuff there too. So it's a completely different feel.
Does Sony still do stuff?
Yep.
I don't know. I'm just trying to. Sony doesn't have a booth at New York Comic Con anymore. From what I'm going.
Well, they will now that they buff Funimation.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I have no idea what's gonna look like. So everybody's kind of waiting on bated breath, because the only person that is, I think, the only person that's left from Funimation is their creative.
Oh, C.
Well, Gen Fukunaga's still there.
Yeah, he's the only one.
In the same role.
Okay. He's the only one. Everybody else is... So I don't know if they're going to keep the dubbing studios, or are they just going to scrap that? Because Sony doesn't do any of that.
Sony was terrible with their anime releases, quite frankly.
Oh, yes they have. So I'm curious how that... And everybody's kind of waiting on bated breath. I subscribe to VRV, which basically has Crunchyroll and Funimation and 8 other channels. But that's how I watch a lot of the Funimation stuff, and that's basically the only way that I watched all the Funimation stuff. I mean, I buy a lot of things, but I only buy them after I've seen them, because you already know how that works out. So
I know Sony spent a ton of money to acquire Funimation.
Yeah, a lot more than I thought they would.
Just in my own opinion, I don't see them actively dismantling the dubbing portion of Funimation. I think that's one of the main reasons they bought them.
But this is Sony, so we don't know what's going to look like.
Again, yeah, I mean, Sony, in their minds, they're about due for another Spider-Man origin movie, I'm sure.
They already just did one.
I'm just looking forward to the eventual emoji movie project that Funimation has to promote.
Everything's going to have what are those things? The Minions?
That's a different company. That's
different company.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, I'll take the Minions over the Emoji Movie any day of the week.
Yeah, me too. Minions are actually funny.
For the most part, yeah, they are pretty funny.
I like the Minions.
Yeah.
I've never seen the Minion movie, but I love using them in GIFs and stuff like that.
Actually, I watched the Minion movie the last time I went to Japan.
Oh, yeah. It's funny because when we flew over, we had access to movies that we've never seen before. I saw the movie Orange, the live action version, before Orange the anime had come out. I still haven't seen the anime yet, but I saw the movie. I saw a live action Bakuman that I thought was actually pretty good. Obviously, that has an anime. I think the anime came first, though. Yeah, it's interesting. I still haven't seen Your Name. It was supposed to come out in November here or something like that.
I saw Your Name in theaters.
Really?
Yeah, back in
How was it?
earlier this year. So I went into, when I saw Your Name, I went into the theater knowing nothing other than that it was this super successful movie in Japan.
I know nothing about it either. That's all I know of it.
I left the movie theater going, man, I wish I brought more tissues because that was a good ass movie.
I'm very happy for him because I like Hosoda.
I really liked Your Name. I really liked that movie. Yeah.
Previously, my favorite movie from Hosoda was The Girl Who Leapt Through Time.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It was good. I ended up seeing it subbed because that's the one that because basically the way they did it was that certain times was the dub version, certain times with the sub version, and it just so happened.
Oh, right.
So it wasn't like I chose it. It was more just like it's what was showing when I showed up. So whatever. Yeah, I don't know.
I think we had a. Did we have a dubbed Howl's Moving Castle when we went to the movie?
No, I think that. Oh, yeah.
That was dubbed. Yeah, because we don't normally go to the movie theaters. I think the last anime that we saw was Howl's Moving Castle. You just can tell how long that ago, and that was dubbed when we saw it. So
anymore with what it costs to go to the theater.
Yeah.
It's at the point where it's almost worth just buying the Blu-ray and throwing it out if you don't like it.
This is true. So, but I'm looking forward to that. I'm happy for him because I know he's terrified at the success. Like, oh my god, guys, just okay. Thank you for liking my movie, but just please stop. It's going to be all downhill from here now.
Speaking of new movie releases from Japan, William, have you seen the new Godzilla yet? It's Shin Godzilla in Japan, and
I have not.
Godzilla Resurgence here.
I haven't.
Do you have any interest in the old kaiju flicks?
Eventually. I gotta catch up on my Godzilla. I've seen the two most recent American ones. So the
the 2014 version, right?
Yeah, the good one, and then there's the
the good one, exactly.
The two. When was the previous? What was the Broderick Godzilla?
2001?
I try to forget, but yeah, I think it was around 2001.
Yeah, that movie sucked.
That was terrible.
Yeah, that was just bad all the way around.
John likes the you can actually see the rubber suit.
Oh, well, I grew up watching those movies because they used to do the creature double features on Saturday afternoons on the Philly station. So you just grow up watching Godzilla. I mean, that's what you did.
Did you?
I like Mothra.
Did you hear that the actor who played the original Godzilla just recently passed away?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes. I just read about it. That was sad. He did so much work. With Toei through the years in all of the different kaiju flicks. It's interesting that it was the same actor for I don't know how many years. I mean, decades.
He was what, in the 70s, 80s?
He was old, yeah.
I don't know. He was definitely older because I know he started when he was fairly young, and you figure the original Godzilla was 1954.
It was black and white.
Oh, yeah.
It was black and white all the way up to the 60s.
Yeah. So with... Well, actually, no. In the '60s, it was color because it was all. I think it was
split.
It was Technicolor after the second movie.
They didn't have the money until the '60s.
Right. But the new Shin Godzilla is a retelling of the original Gojira, but in modern times. And this is another thing that I like to call a perfect example of how to do an update of an original movie. Where there are times it's almost shot for shot from the original. But what they did with Godzilla, and I won't, and because this is such a new release, I won't get into the plot, but the way Godzilla was portrayed in this movie, and the way that they chose to go into Japanese bureaucracy and show what goes on behind the scenes when, not that large monsters often invade Tokyo in the real world, but when crises happen in Japan and what goes on, and why it takes them so long sometimes to respond to something, and just all of the red tape. I mean, it was really interesting to watch if you have a head for that. But the one thing that I really took away from it was when watching the movie, I thought to myself, how utterly terrifying this would be were it real.
Yeah.
Whereas the first movie was frightening enough if you were to put your head into that space. But there are things that occur in this movie that if you sat and really just thought about it for a few minutes, I mean, this would be the end of everything if this monster was not stopped. It's something for people that enjoy a good monster flick and that enjoy kaiju-type movies in general. I would say definitely give it a watch. It's really worthwhile, I think. Plus, the effects were excellent.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, and Godzilla is absolutely huge. He's the biggest one ever.
Ooh.
And they really did an incredible job of capturing that scale.
And of course, I always like the real sound effects. Traditional
they
sound
actually
effects.
kept. It was interesting because they kept all the original themes. And they also, the person doing the music was the same person that did a lot of the music for Evangelion. So there are certain times where you hear music that's very reminiscent of Eva because it's the same composer. So there was a lot of interesting juxtaposition between those two things. And a friend of mine who's an Eva fan, which I am not, and I'll own up to it right now.
I'm not either.
I can't. I just can't.
I haven't watched it, so I have no opinion.
You need to, as an anime fan, and if you're, I know you're a mech fan. I do recommend that you watch it probably twice just to make sure that you were right the first time around.
Okay, so really quick story about that. I've only seen one episode of Evangelion, and it was a time where I randomly turned on Adult Swim and like, oh, hey, Eva's on. All right, let's see what this show's about. Guess which episode it was? It was the last episode.
Oh good lord.
So I know how the show ends. I know nothing else about the series.
Oh, no, that's okay, because
you didn't miss anything.
There's 3 other series, and one of them actually physically ended the movie.
I know, it's called The End. I know that.
It's basically Shinji getting the robot.
Yeah, that's the only other thing I know. So speaking of kaijus, I got 2 quick stories that relate to that. So when I was at AnimeNext, they had a late night screening of a very special presentation. Basically, a bunch of voice actors took one of the GAMERA movies, and they did a comedy redub to make everyone sound Southern.
I
would love to see
really
that.
hope this gets published. That's like watching MST3K.
It's not official, so you can only see it in private showings. It was fun. It was fun to watch.
What was that? You can only see it in pirate showings?
Private showings.
I would love to see that.
Yeah. And then the other story is that, hey, you want to hear my first exposure to Godzilla?
Sure.
So, when I was a kid, my first exposure to Godzilla was the Godzilla NES video game.
Oh,
wow.
Where you played
God, I remember
where
that.
you played as Godzilla and Mothra and fought other Godzilla characters. Or other kaiju characters. I don't remember the exact details. It was very hard, and I'm not sure, and I'm pretty sure the game was not good, but I played it a lot as a kid because you don't know better when you're a kid.
Right. Yeah. It's a game and things blow up.
I remember the existence of it. I've never played it.
I always preferred playing as Mothra because she can fly, which made things a lot easier.
Right. Oh my.
No, when you had mentioned earlier that Nintendo Power, we had that, and I wouldn't be surprised if we still have the one that has the disc that has Pokemon in it.
We may,
because I never threw any of them out.
Well, I knew we had official PlayStation magazine from issue 1 through several hundred.
Yeah, we had Nintendo Power for a longest time, and God.
Well, that was the only way back in the day get off my lawn, you kids. That was the way you got demos, because you got a demo disc, and the articles were good. I mean, it's official PlayStation magazine, just like it's Nintendo Power. I mean, you've got to understand what you're going to be getting. There's going to be some fairly biased reviews in there. But the demos were wonderful, because at least that way you knew what to avoid.
Yeah. This was well before, I mean, obviously, Xbox wasn't a thing, PlayStation Network wasn't a thing, like, none of this stuff was a thing, so that was the only way.
Well, you couldn't download demos, there was no way to do it.
Yeah.
The systems didn't have hard drives at that time.
Nope. So, yikes. God. So, kind of slowly wrapping up, what kind of genre do you, like, whenever it's a new season or whatever, you see something on a list, you have nothing... no background whatsoever, do you look at like a genre and start looking at what are the things within that genre? How do you tackle those things?
So I tackle things the same way I tackle buying things on DVD. I look at the cover, or in this case the promotional art, and I go, alright, that looks interesting, let's go with that.
Don, how do you do it?
Largely the same way. It's not so much the cover art or the image, depending on what format you're viewing, whether it's on the net or not. I usually read descriptions to get a general idea. I watch a lot of anime, or at least I start to watch a lot of anime. There are a lot of shows in a given season that I'll get halfway through one episode and go, yeah, don't need to watch that. Because, let's face it, in any field where there are a lot of entries put out, many of them are not going to be very good.
Not to mention...
Or they're going to be extremely niche.
Not to mention, there's a boatload of new series every season. It's like...
It's like, what, 25 to 30?
Mm-hmm.
It's borderline impossible to keep up with all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It would need to be
in their descriptions.
It would need to be your job.
Yeah, which, trust me, it's not.
Yeah.
Well, that's why a lot of people burn out. Like, I've been watching anime for 45 now, I would say 43 years, and I'm not burned out because I don't sit there and watch everything that comes out. Like, it's not a race. It's like, it's supposed to be entertainment. It's no different than watching, Game of Thrones or something like that. It's just like, the way I watch it is, I have Don look at it first, and then he badgers me for a year, going, "Dude, you gotta watch this thing."
A year, that's on the good ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way I do things for the most part, William, is I will, like you, get a little bit of information on a series. It doesn't have to be, a 4-hour Wikipedia read, but just get a general idea of something, give it a shot, and if it doesn't catch my interest fairly quickly, I just give it a pass and roll on. Because I don't have the time to spend time on mediocre shovelware, or the equivalent of shovelware in the anime world.
Yeah.
Do you watch week to week, or you kind of wait until something's gone through in marathon?
I watch week to week if I actually start on week 1 and I like the show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So generally, no. Unfortunately. It's just kind of like, when I get to it, I gotta do it. The closest I've ever gotten to staying on a week-to-week basis with the series is Mr. Osomatsu when it was airing at the time.
I still have to watch that.
Hey, funny quick story. I was at Viz's industry panel at Otakon, and at the end of their presentation, they had a special announcement of a special show that they licensed. And then they started giving hints as what that show was. And I decided I'm going to record this on my phone so I can post it on Twitter and try to get some retweets. What I wasn't expecting was that one of the hints... So the first hint was like, it's an anime series. Obviously, that's it's very general. It's an anime series a lot of people love. In fact, people love it 6 different ways. And all of a sudden, that one heart on screen turns into 6 distinctly different colored... hearts that happen to match the 6 colors of the brothers from Mr. Osomatsu, in which at that point I start freaking out uncontrollably and embarrass myself, as evident in the video, because I realized...
Hey, but you called it!
Because I realized exactly what it was, and holy crap, I was not expecting Viz to be the one to pick up Mr. Osomatsu, but I'm glad they did.
I'm curious if they're gonna get Otsumatsu-kun. Or even just a couple episodes here and there to give background.
Probably not, to be honest. I think they would have announced it if they did. So, because they said it's Mr. Osomatsu, it's the current season, it's whatever aired in Japan. And for those of you wondering, they were asked, what about that first episode that we're not allowed to watch on anywhere anymore? And she said, it's not going to be on it because no one's allowed to show that episode anymore, even in Japan. So unfortunately, we can't do it.
I have zero background on it.
So the first episode, which is actually hilarious, is it's a fourth wall breaking episode in which the characters of the original Osomatsu-kun in black and white 4:3 ratio get a letter saying that they get a new anime series, and they all start celebrating and realize, oh, wait a minute, all of our comedy material is horribly out of date because we're from the 60s.
I did see this, yes. Okay.
And so they decide we're going to modernize, and pretty much the rest of the episode is them making fun of a lot of modern anime series. Like, the first thing they do is they turn into a male version of, like, Idolmaster or Love Live, that sort of stuff. And then it turns into Iran High School Host Club. And
I have to see this.
and
I don't care if I have to put an eye patch on. I have to see this.
And it's so much. And then basically the whole thing, it just devolves into this whole mess at the very end where they're just making fun of like everything under the sun. And they basically, they ruin the episode. And it ends with them going, wow, that was a mistake. We should start the show proper next week. The problem was Japan's laws on copyright are way stricter than they are in the U.S. And basically doing that type of parody,
my understanding is fair use is not
it's not a thing in
a
Japan.
concept in Japan.
Yeah.
What I found interesting, now, have you seen Shirobako?
No. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I have a proposition.
Yes.
For this podcast, and you can dictate how many episodes you want. I'm not gonna force you to watch 26 episodes by the next podcast. I'm just not gonna do that. Take a chunk that you know you're gonna do, and tell me how many you're going to do, and I'll do Osomatsu-san, and you do Shirobako.
Okay.
And then we'll review it.
Okay.
Because my honest opinion, you have to see Shirobako. Do you know anything about that series?
I know it's a series. I know it's an anime about making anime. That's what I know.
Yep. That's basically it. It follows the story of one girl. Actually, there's a group of 5 girls, but it's really concentrating on one, where she becomes, like an assistant, production assistant, starting at ground level at a, basically Kyoto Animation, because it is literally the building of Kyoto Animation. And they spent the entire time realistically depicting not just what goes on and whatever, actually using real people. So when you see, like, for example, the director of freaking Evangelion was there, actually voiced everything, looks exactly like him. They passed by Production IG, which was a product.
Yeah, Product I think it was.
Product I.
Or iProduct, I forget what it was.
Like, all of the animation studios, they would, like, slightly change the name, but you knew what they were. They changed the names of each person, even though you knew who their actual depiction was, which I thought was interesting when you were explaining all of the fourth wall breaking and whatever. And I'm like, you do really... PA Works was the one that did this. And so they have always been very good at depicting real life locations to the point where if you put a photograph up, it would look identical to what is on the screen. And people have done that, where all of a sudden, this is the building. This is the building in Shirobako. This is this. That is that in Shirobako. And you can literally trace like exact locations and people and stuff like that, to the point where there was one character that was not happy how he was depicted in Shirobako.
Well,
and I won't spoil what it is, but it was because everybody knew it. It was like, oh, this is this person, this is that person, and you see all of the bureaucracy that goes on with making anime. I wish more people got to see it. Obviously, you have fantastical things, like the girls want to do, an anime, and then the main character has sort of, there's a phrase for it where she has imaginary people that she talks to. I think one's a bear, and I forget what the other.
They're two little stuffed critters. One's a Lolita with an eye patch, and the other, or goth Loli with an eye patch, and the other's just a stuffed bear.
It's sort of like an angel-devil conversation thing. So obviously that's not real, but it serves as a way to bounce back her internal thoughts. So obviously that's not real, but it's really interesting how that works out, and it's one of those series that it's interesting to recommend, because the first season was okay, and I liked it. I liked it a lot. I marathoned the whole thing because I watched it after the whole thing was out. but the payoff for it is in the last 2 episodes, specifically the second to last episode. But that won't feel real until you've gone through season 1 and season 2. So it's like you're gonna have to. I mean, it's not.
It's not a slog through season 1.
No,
season
but
1 is good. There's a lot of minutia that needs to be gone through so that you have context for what happens in the second cour.
And the other thing as well, the more you have actually worked in corporate America and you see certain things that are happening, like it was funny because I mentioned this before, that one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast is that I had been watching a lot of VRV, and I ran into Rooster Teeth's fan service show, which was basically just a podcast, everybody talking, and they had done Shirobako. Well, they're all of them are animators because they've done a lot of things like, Red versus Blue and Ruby and all those stuff like that. So they're watching the episodes, and from a production standpoint, they will go off into their own stories. Like, I know this actually happens. I know this doesn't look weird, as I know it looks weird, and people think that it's all. This is not dramatized. This crap actually happens. And so, for someone that likes animation, like, I started wanting to draw again. I got myself a light box and everything to draw and possibly do animation at some point. Because that series did so much to inspire someone that loved animation. So I want you to watch that, and I know you've been badgering me to watch Osomatsu-san. So I think we should probably do that. Thoughts?
Okay. That's fine.
So we'll probably do, like maybe 3 episodes or something per podcast if you want.
Well, okay. I'll see what I can do.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if we do this on a monthly basis, that shouldn't be too bad.
You do monthly or bi-monthly?
We'll see.
Well, I know you're finishing up your series, so you won't technically be available quickly until after Vegas, right?
It's only 1 day of recording. Yeah, it's
and you don't have to edit it.
No, I really don't edit. No.
Okay. So we can do informally twice a month.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay. So yay. So we can probably do. Is Osomatsu also 26? Ish.
20. There's okay. So when they took out episode 1 because someone complained, I don't know who, but someone had to complain. They made another episode to replace that one to put on the DVDs, and then they made another episode because they were sponsored by the Japanese Racing Association. So there are technically 28.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are they on Crunchyroll or Funimation?
Everything's
streaming anywhere?
Everything's on Crunchyroll with the exception of episode 1, which
I'll look for.
Which we'll discuss.
Yeah.
In a non-recorded way.
Yeah, just to be clear for anyone that might be listening, please support official streaming.
Yep, which is why, and all of Shirobako is current on Crunchyroll as well. In fact, I marathon that.
I mean, for folks, and I'm sure that any audience garnered by this podcast, some of the folks will be younger folks that are just getting into the workforce, without getting into a lecture on business. Businesses don't do things because they feel like it.
Yeah.
They do things because they're passionate for it, and they want to be able to make a living doing that, like everyone does, because we all like to eat. So it's very important to try to support official legal methods of watching things and of purchasing things, because that goes back to the creators at some point, and that causes them to want to do it more. In Japan right now, many animation studios are closing. It's very sad what goes on in the anime industry, and that's if you ever want to get an education as to what happens, a YouTube channel called the Kanapa Effect goes very deeply into the animation background of what happens, the business end of what happens in anime. So it's very, very important to support the original creators, and then the people like Funimation and the other studios that do dubbing work, because this is their livelihood, but it's also their passion.
Mm-hmm. Which is why we're always worried about when you hear stuff like, Sony buying Funimation, and I'm thinking in my head, what's going to happen to all those people?
Yeah. Hopefully, they'll leave it alone and just enjoy the profits.
Yeah.
I hope so. We'll see.
Yeah, but I want as many people. That's why I could, and I always say the hashtag not sponsored when I do my videos, where, because I do a monthly favorites on what stuff that I buy. Like I go through Amazon and going, like I'm now getting a pretty nice sized library of the light novels and Blu-rays of a lot of the series that I like that I like watching. So I guess the benefit of me waiting as long as I do to watch series sometimes is I could go, wow, that was great. Let me go buy the complete box set of this.
Well, that's why I love all these like Crunchyroll and Verve or VRV, whatever you'd like to call it, because now there are legal ways to be able to see things and not have to buy anime sight unseen and find out it ends up being a Heat Guy J.
Yeah.
Because yikes, that's a huge waste of money when you spend upwards of $100 on a 12-episode series, depending on who publishes it, only to find out that it's garbage.
Yeah.
Hey, how's it going? Anyway.
You bought it?
Well, no, let's just say that, like, that makes things more fun. It's like gambling.
Your impulse buys are hilarious. Now, at the same time, you don't spend a lot of money on it, but some of the stuff that you get, I do find it funny that you did, non-impulse buy. You got it out of recommendation to get those Hun Elves. Did you ever watch any of it?
Not yet. I will, but
not yet. Okay.
It's old, but it's good stuff.
Yeah, this is where we start having the conversation of the evolution of dubbing and how all of that has changed over time. So
probably save that for another episode.
Yeah. In fact, I'll write it down. But yeah, so this is at least a general idea on the kind of stuff that I wanted to do now on a bi-monthly basis. Well, you can just keep up with us on social media, and of course on my website, so you'll see as they come up. But yeah, so I can be reached in Twitter and YouTube at Arsenette, ARSENETTE. My website's ramblingreekin.com. That's still up. And my Instagram is also Rambling Reekin. And the reason why I say this still up, because the Final Stage podcast is still up on YouTube and will still be up on the website, finalstagepodcast.com. And but the iTunes, in fact, by the time this comes out, would have already been discontinued. But all of it is still on William's channel. And William, what's your information?
Yeah. So you can follow me on Twitter at 2D2Will. Check out youtube.com/222productions where I talk about ninja-related things, including my ongoing series where I review every single episode of American Ninja Warrior Season 9 as it happens, and try not to kill myself. Anyway, and I got other stuff too, but that's all I'm going to talk about this time around. So, yeah, that's me.
And
the only social media I participate in, and that sparingly, would be Twitter, and I can be reached at Domnall, DOMNHAL. I'll explain that later.
And that's pretty much it for this one. And so if you guys have any questions, comments, related, whatever, feel free to contact any of us on social media or in the comments below on YouTube. This is probably going to be the only place that I have it. Should any interest arise in getting stuff on iTunes, we can do that at a later date. Yeah, up to this point, I'm just going to put this up on YouTube and see if anybody interested. So that's pretty much it. Thank you for listening.
Bye.
See ya.